What is up, Cal and Koinonia? Welcome to Small Groups. I am so glad to be connecting with you today. I'm sitting with you in your small groups as we wrap up our 2020-2021 school year. It's wild to me that we are finally at the end of this year that has been filled with challenge and resilience from you guys. It's been filled with some stretching and some difficulty, but also a richness of love and joy and friendships and community. As we get to the end of this year, as we survey all that has happened, all the places we've met God and all the things in front of us where we are not sure what is going to happen, it's appropriate for us, it's healthy for us to sit in the presence of God and say, God, where do we go from here? What's next? Where will you meet us in this next season of our lives? As we do that today, I'd love to jump into the story of Exodus. And this is a passage that I have shared a number of times with our community, but I think it's one that is rich and gives us some language from which we can talk about what God is going to do in the future. The story of Exodus picks up with the people of God in bondage. They are slaves in the land of Egypt. They are slaves to an oppressive regime. They are physically, emotionally, mentally attacked. They are people who have been devastated, who feel completely abandoned. When they cry out to God and they say, God, help us. And the Bible tells us that God hears their cry and he steps in to save them, because God is a God who cares about the oppressed. He is a God who longs to free those who are in bondage. And so God sends Moses. He sends Moses back to Egypt to gather the people of Israel, to go before Pharaoh and say, let my people go. And we know the story, we've seen the movie. He lets the people go. But not right away. Not easily, right? There's this weird back and forth where Pharaoh keeps saying no, and Moses keeps coming before him, and God shows his power. He shows the depth of his love. He shows the hugeness of his strength and his might. He sends these plagues upon Egypt, and finally Pharaoh is convinced. He says, just get out of here. You're more trouble than you're worth. And he sends them on their way. And the people of Israel, they leave Egypt, carrying everything they have on their back, with their friends and their family, their community, walking out of civilization into the desert, into a place where they don't know the way, where there's no roads, there's no water, there's no food, there's nothing. They walk out. And there's surely this mix of joy and excitement, and God did this. God worked so powerfully, and some trepidation, some doubt, some fear, and some concern about what's the way forward. And they walk. For days, they walk into the desert until they get to the edge of the Red Sea. The Red Sea is a body of water. It's salt water. It's the sea. And it's wider than Lake Michigan. It's longer than the state of Illinois. It's this huge body of water, a desert right up to the sea. They get to the edge of it, and it's this immovable, unpassable obstacle in their way. And they remember what God has done for them. They saw the plagues. They saw God's power. They had the Passover meal. They had seen God move powerfully. But now they get to this immovable option, and their imagination doesn't even allow them to figure that it is crossable. And they look behind them, and they see the glint of armor on the horizon. Soldiers are coming, chariots. Pharaoh has sent the whole of the armies of Egypt out after them. And so they're sitting there in this place, a literal rock and a hard place, right? They're sitting there looking at this immovable object in front of them. They're looking backwards and they see this unbeatable army breaking down on them. And there's this point of just emotional breaking for the people of Israel. They've seen what God has done, but now when they are in this situation again, when they are placed in a spot where they cannot be freed, they completely crumble and they cry out to Moses, say, "Why did you bring us here to die in the desert? Weren't there enough graves in Egypt?" They cry and they mourn and they tear their clothes and they look to Moses. Moses stands up on a rock before the people and he cries to them, "Quiet." And he says, "The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Friends, as we near the end of this school year, as we reflect on all that's happened, all that we've experienced and all that we anticipate coming next, I think a lot of us find ourselves emotionally at the edge of the sea. We look out and we don't see a way forward for into the brokenness of our world, right? We've seen God move in the past, but as we look at racial injustice, as we look at the environmental issues of our world, as we look at political divides, as we look at COVID and continuing options and challenges for reopening, as we look at all of the things in our world that seem unfixable, it feels like we're standing at the edge of the sea. For some of us, we've seen God work, we've experienced Him, we know Him, and we know Him in this place, in our church, right? But we look out at the sea of all of the other places that we think God needs to work too, and we can't even imagine, hey, how could God work in my school? How could God work in my sports team? How could God work in all of these places? And we look out at that sea and we don't see a way forward. And then we look back and we see the army that has COVID and normal mental health challenges that we had before the pandemic, and our busy schedules and the pressures of getting into the right college bearing down on us. It's normal to feel trapped. It's normal to worry. We've seen God do crazy things. We've seen God transform lives. We've seen God change communities, change our hearts. But it's human in points of pain, in points of doubt, to be afraid. The Israelites were right to be afraid then. But God will always fight for you, even when we don't see a way forward, even when we don't see how the world that we live in could get better, even when we don't see how the injustices we experience, the mental health cloud that just sits over our heads, we don't see how that could ever go away. The Bible tells us, Jesus tells us that He is making all things new. Revelations 21:5, Jesus says to us, He promises, "Behold, I am making all things new." Jesus says He came to give us life and life to the abundance. He came not that we would have a spirit of fear or timidity, but we would have the spirit of strength and power. Jesus came to this world to make a way forward for us when there is no way. And so, friends, as we sit at the edge of this sea, as we look at the crap that's coming at us from behind, my call to you, my hope for you is that you would sit and you would pray, that you would be still and know that Jesus will make a way for you. Even when we don't see it, even when we don't see how it could possibly be done, Jesus is in the business of healing those who are broken, of mending relationships that can't be fixed. He's in the business of uniting His people. He is in the business of freeing those who are in bondage. He is in the business of lifting up the poor and the oppressed. He is in the business of mending relationships that can't be mended. He is in the business of healing families that can't be healed. He is in the business of uniting churches that are fighting over things that seem like they matter so much to us, but maybe really don't all that much. Jesus is in the business of healing and fixing us. Friends, it might feel as we end this year that we are looking out at a sea that is uncrossable. But no, Jesus is making a way for us. As we close today, as I pass you back to your small groups to have conversation, I want to leave you with the words of Psalm 121. This is a Psalm of David. He says, I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Friends, the Lord will fight for you. He will make a way for you. He will heal what is broken for you. He will lift the cloud of depression for you. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still.